She stepped into the training yard, her faded gray hoodie hanging loose, a battered duffel bag slung over one shoulder, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. The recruits smirked. "What's this, a janitor who got lost?" one muttered. During a sparring drill, a burly cadet grabbed her sleeve, ripping it at the seam, and sneered, "Girls like you are only good for folding laundry." But when the tear exposed a jagged tattoo across her shoulder blade, a grizzled major froze, snapped to attention, and saluted. The yard went silent. That wasn't just ink. It was the shadowed mark of Nightshade, a name whispered only in classified briefings. Clara Voss didn't belong here, not in their eyes. She'd rolled up to the remote NATO training base in a rusty Jeep, its fenders dented, its tires crusted with red clay from some forgotten trail. No one would have guessed she was born into a family that owned half the vineyards in Bordeaux, raised in a world of marble hallways and private conservatories. Clara carried none of that with her. No sleek athleisure, no manicured hands, just a freckled face and clothes that looked like they'd survived a dozen thrift stores. Her boots were worn, the leather cracked. Her duffel was patched with duct tape. But it was her stillness that set her apart, the way she stood at the edge of the chaos. Hands tucked into her pockets, eyes scanning the horizon like she was waiting for a storm only she could sense. The first day was brutal. Major Kessler, the head instructor, was a towering figure with a voice like gravel under tank treads. He stalked the yard, sizing up the cadets, his gaze pinning Clara like a dart. "You," he growled, jabbing a finger. "What's your story? Mess hall send you to mop up?" The group snickered. A cadet named Lena, with a sleek auburn braid and a smirk that cut like a blade, leaned toward the recruit next to her. "Bet she's here for diversity points," she whispered. Clara's face didn't flicker. She met Kessler's stare, her voice steady. "I'm a cadet, sir." Kessler huffed, waving her off. "Fall in then. Don't drag us down." In the mess hall that evening, Clara carried her tray to a corner, away from the roar of boasts and bravado. The air buzzed with recruits trading stories, their voices sharp, their egos sharper. A lanky cadet named Milo, all sharp angles and cocky grin, spotted her alone. He sauntered over, slamming his tray down hard enough to rattle her water glass. "Hey, Stray!" he called, loud enough for heads to turn. "This ain't a homeless shelter. Sure you're in the right place?" The tables nearby erupted. Clara paused, her spoon hovering, and looked at him. "I'm eating," she said, her tone flat as asphalt. Milo leaned closer, smirking. "Yeah, eat quick. Real soldiers need that seat." He flicked her tray, sending a blob of gravy splattering onto her hoodie. The room roared. Clara wiped it off with a napkin, her movements slow, her eyes fixed on her plate. She took another bite, like he wasn't even there. Warm-ups were a crucible. Push-ups until your shoulders screamed, sprints that seared your throat, burpees in the dust under a merciless sun. Clara kept up, her breaths even, but her boots betrayed her, one lace fraying and slipping loose. During a sprint, a cadet named Jonas, the group's golden boy with a chiseled jaw and a swagger that screamed privilege, jogged up beside her. "Hey, bargain bin," he called, loud enough for the line to hear. "Your boots giving up already? Or is that just you?" The group laughed. Clara stayed silent, knelt, and retied the lace with deft fingers, her movements quick and sure. As she stood, Jonas nudged her shoulder, hard. She stumbled, her palms hitting the dirt, knees sinking into the churned earth. The group howled. "What's that, Voss?" Jonas grinned. "Auditioning to scrub the latrines?" Clara rose, brushed the mud from her hands, and ran on, her silence louder than their jeers. During a break, Clara sat on a splintered bench, unwrapping a protein bar from her bag. Lena sauntered over with two other cadets, her arms crossed, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Clara, right? So, where'd you even come from? Win a raffle to be here?" Her friends giggled, one hiding her laugh behind a hand. Clara took a bite, chewed deliberately, and looked up. "I applied," she said, her voice as plain as the dust under her boots. Lena's smile tightened. "Okay, but why?" she pressed, leaning in. "You don't exactly scream warrior. I mean, look at you." She gestured at Clara's stained hoodie, her scuffed boots. Clara set her bar down, leaned forward just enough to make Lena flinch. "I'm here to train," she said. "Not to make you feel taller." Lena's face flushed, her lips parting, but she spun away, muttering, "Freak, if this story's pulling you in, do me a quick favor. Grab your phone, hit like, maybe drop a word or two in the comments about what's resonating. And subscribe. It keeps stories like Clara's alive, stories that remind us what it means to stand unshaken." Let's dive back in. The land navigation drill was a beast. Cadets had to cross a rugged valley, map in hand, under a tight clock. Clara moved solo, her compass steady, her steps silent on the pine-strewn ground. A group of 4, led by a wiry cadet named Theo, spotted her studying her map under an oak. Theo, always chasing Jonas's spotlight, saw his opening. "Hey, wilderness scout," he taunted, his voice slicing through the quiet. "Lost already? Or just out here sketching trees?" His crew laughed, closing in. Clara folded her map, her fingers deliberate, and kept walking. Theo darted forward, snatching the map and ripping it in two, the pieces fluttering like dead leaves. "Let's see you navigate now," he said, tossing them into the wind. The group cheered. Clara watched the scraps drift, her face blank, then looked at Theo. "Hope you memorized yours," she said, and walked on, her pace unbroken. Theo's grin wavered, but his crew kept jeering, their voices echoing through the pines. That afternoon's rifle drill was a revelation. Cadets had 2 minutes to strip, clean, and reassemble an M4 carbine. Most fumbled, cursing as pins slipped, parts clattering. Jonas finished in a sloppy 140, smirking like he'd won. Lena scraped by at 155, her hands trembling as she clicked the final piece. Then Clara stepped up. She didn't rush, didn't falter. Her hands moved like they were wired to the rifle. Pins out, bolt free, parts aligned in a neat row. 50 seconds flat. Not a single misstep. Sergeant Novak, the instructor, stared at the timer, then at her. "Voss," he said, his voice low. "Where'd you learn that?" Clara wiped her hands on her jeans, her eyes down. "Practice," she said. The training screen replayed her movements in slow motion. Every motion fluid, no waste. A lieutenant muttered to Novak, "That's not cadet level, that's elite." Jonas overheard, scoffing. "So she can play with guns," he said, loud enough for Clara to hear. "Doesn't mean she can fight." But during the break, a quiet cadet named Inez, who'd been watching Clara, slipped her a spare map. "For the next drill," Inez whispered, glancing around. Clara took it, nodded once, and tucked it away without a word. Whispers started to ripple through the camp after the rifle drill. Cadet stole glances at Clara during the next break, trying to unravel her. She didn't seem to notice, sitting cross-legged on the grass, retying her frayed bootlaces with the same precision she'd shown with the rifle. Her face stayed blank, unreadable, like a locked door. Novak, the sergeant, leaned toward Jonas, his voice a low growl. "Bet she's got some hard luck story. Kid from nowhere, clawing for a shot." Jonas snorted, kicking a pebble across the dirt. "Yeah, well, she's proving she's nothing special." Clara's fingers stilled on her laces for a split second, then resumed, tying the knot tight, like she was anchoring something deep inside. In the equipment shed, where cadets were issued gear for the next drill, Clara waited quietly, her duffel slung over one shoulder. The quartermaster, a weathered man named Holt with a perpetual scowl, handed out vests and helmets like he was tossing out garbage. When Clara stepped up, he eyed her up and down, his lip curling. "What's this, a thrift store raid?" he barked, loud enough for the line to hear. "We don't got gear for tourists, kid." He tossed her a vest, oversized and sagging, the straps flapping uselessly. The cadets behind her snickered. "Use it as a tarp," one called. Clara caught the vest, her grip tightening on the rough canvas. She didn't argue, didn't ask for a better one. She just walked out, her boots thudding on the concrete floor. Holt chuckled, shaking his head. "She'll be gone by sundown," he said to the room. Outside, Clara rigged the vest with a few quick knots, her fingers moving with surgical precision, making it fit like it was tailored. The next morning's terrain run was a beast, 10 miles over jagged hills, full gear, no pauses. Clara stayed mid-pack, her breathing steady, her steps rhythmic despite the weight of the ill-fitting vest. Lena trailed close behind, muttering under her breath. "Move it, Drifter," she hissed. "You're slowing us down." At the halfway point, Lena gave Clara's arm a subtle shove, just enough to throw her off balance. Clara's boot caught a jutting rock, and she veered off the path, her ankle twisting as she hit the dirt. Major Kessler saw it. "Voss," he roared, "break formation! You cost the squad points!" The group groaned, some shooting her glares. Jonas turned, his face flushed with sweat and smugness. "Nice work, Voss. Real asset." Clara didn't respond. She rejoined the line, her jaw tight, her limp barely visible. When the run ended, Kessler pointed at her. 5 extra laps. Now." The others watched, some smirking, as Clara started running again, her breaths sharp, her hoodie dark with sweat. No one offered her water. Lena tossed an empty bottle at her feet, laughing. "Drink the wind, charity case." Clara picked it up, crushed it in her fist, and dropped it in the trash without a sound. The night drill was chaos, cadets tasked with setting up a perimeter under simulated enemy fire. Flares hissed overhead, painting the sky red, while instructors bellowed orders, sowing confusion. Clara worked alone, securing a rope barrier with steady hands, her movements calm amid the pandemonium. A stocky cadet named Bruno, always eager to stir trouble, saw her as an easy mark. He grabbed her rope, yanking it loose, and tossed it into the mud. "Whoops," he grinned, his voice dripping with mockery. "Not cut out for this, are you?" The cadets nearby laughed, their flashlights dancing as they watched. Clara knelt, retrieved the rope, and started over, her fingers methodical, unfazed. Bruno wasn't done. He kicked a clump of dirt onto her hands, coating the rope in grime. "Keep at it, Princess," he said. "Maybe you'll get it by dawn." The group roared. Clara paused, her hands still, then looked up at him. "You finished?" she asked, her voice low but razor-sharp. Bruno blinked, caught off guard, but forced a laugh. She resumed her work, the rope clean and taut in moments. Later, when the drill ended, Bruno's own barrier was found slack, costing his squad points. No one saw Clara near it. But Inez, watching from the sidelines, hid a faint smile. That night in the barracks, Clara sat on her bunk, pulling a worn photo from her duffel. It was faded, the edges soft from years of handling, showing a younger Clara beside a man in a dark coat, his face obscured by shadow. His stance, shoulders square, head tilted, carried an undeniable weight. She traced a finger over the image, her lips tightening, then slipped it back into her bag as footsteps approached. Jonas passed by, tossing his towel over his shoulder. "Sleep well, Voss," he said. "Tomorrow's shooting. Don't choke." Clara didn't look at him. She lay back, hands behind her head, staring at the cracked ceiling, her breathing slow and even. The long-range shooting exam was a crucible. 5 shots, 400 meters, 5 bullseyes, or you're out. The cadets lined up, jittery, adjusting scopes, muttering about crosswinds. Lena went first, missing 2 shots, her face ashen as she stepped back. Jonas hit 4, swearing under his breath. Then Clara took her place. She settled into position, her movements deliberate, almost mechanical. 5 shots, 5 perfect hits, dead center, no hesitation, no scope tweaks. The range officer stared at the target, then called it out. Voss, perfect score. A major, an older man with a chest heavy with ribbons, leaned forward from the observation post. Who trained her? He murmured to his aide. That's a sniper's trigger. Jonas overheard, rolling his eyes. Lucky shots, he said, loud enough for Clara to hear. Let's see her in a real fight. But during the equipment check, the range officer found Clara's rifle had a misaligned sight, something she'd compensated for without a word. He shook his head, muttering, "That's not luck. That's something else." In the mess hall the next day, Clara's tray was empty. The kitchen had run dry by the time she reached the line. She sat anyway, sipping water, her face calm. A group led by a cadet named Zara, tall and smug with a laugh that carried, saw their chance. Zara strolled over and dropped a half-eaten pear onto Clara's tray. "Here," she said, her voice thick with fake pity. "Can't let you waste away, right? You'll need strength to carry our gear." The table behind her exploded in laughter. Clara looked at the pear, then at Zara, her eyes steady. "Thanks," she said, picking it up and taking a slow bite. Zara's smirk faltered. She'd expected a reaction, not this quiet defiance. The group kept laughing, but it felt hollow. Clara finished the pear, core and all, and set her tray aside. As she stood to leave, she brushed past Zara, her shoulder grazing just enough to make Zara step back. The room hushed for a moment, watching her go. The combat simulation was the true crucible. Hand-to-hand, no weapons, one-on-one. Clara was paired with Jonas, whose broad frame loomed over her, his fists clenched, a grin spreading like he'd already won. Before the whistle, he lunged, grabbing her hoodie and slamming her against the padded wall. The fabric tore, splitting from shoulder to back, revealing the jagged black tattoo of a coiled serpent crushing a cracked skull. The squad erupted in laughter. "She's got ink!" Lena jeered. "What is this, a biker bar?" Jonas leaned in, his breath hot on her face. "This ain't a game, Voss. Go back to your soup kitchen." Clara didn't flinch, her eyes locked on his, steady, unyielding. "Let go," she said, her voice a low blade. Jonas chuckled, loosening his grip for a fraction of a second. She stepped back, the torn hoodie slipping lower, the full tattoo now stark against her skin. The yard fell silent. A major, the same one who'd watched her at the range, stepped forward, his boots crunching on the gravel. His face paled, his eyes fixed on the tattoo. "Who authorized that mark?" he demanded, his voice trembling. Clara stood tall, the tattoo exposed, her expression calm. "I didn't choose it," she said quietly. "It was given by Nightshade himself. I trained under him for 6 years." The major froze, then snapped a salute, his hand rigid. The other officers stared, jaws slack. Jonas stumbled back, his face drained. An aide whispered, "No one carries that mark unless they're his last apprentice." Lena's smirk vanished. She looked away, her hands shaking. The next morning, during a strategy briefing, Clara sat in the back, her notebook open, her pen moving in quick, precise strokes. The instructor, a sharp-eyed woman named Major Vinter, was dissecting defensive formations when she zeroed in on Clara. "Voss, you got something to say, or are you just sketching back there?" The room turned, expecting her to shrink. Clara looked up, her pen still, and said, "Your right flank's wide open. An ambush would cut your unit in half." Vinter blinked, caught off guard, then glanced at the board. "Explain," she said. Clara stood, walked to the diagram, and drew a swift adjustment, her lines clean and sure. "Move your scouts here," she said. "It blocks their approach." The room went quiet. Vinter nodded slowly. "Noted. Sit." As Clara returned to her seat, Lena muttered, "Teacher's pet now." Vinter overheard, her voice cutting like a whip. "Quiet, cadet. She just saved your imaginary squad." Lena's face burned, and the room shifted, eyes lingering on Clara with a flicker of respect. Nightshade was a phantom, a name erased from official records years ago. whispers of his unit, missions that never existed, operatives who vanished, hung like smoke in the air. His mark was a legend, given only to those he deemed worthy. Clara didn't look at the Major, didn't meet anyone's gaze. She pulled her torn hoodie over her shoulder and walked to the yard's edge, her steps measured, deliberate. The silence clung to her, heavy and thick. Jonas couldn't let it go. His ego wouldn't allow it. He stood in the center of the yard, fists balled, his voice booming. "A tattoo doesn't mean anything," he shouted. "Prove it in a real fight." The cadets exchanged uneasy glances. Clara stopped, turned, her eyes cold. "If that's what you want," she said, her voice steady. She didn't bother fixing her hoodie, the tattoo still visible, her stance relaxed but unyielding. Jonas charged, swinging hard, his fists aiming for her jaw. Clara sidestepped every blow, her movements fluid, almost effortless. He roared, "Hit me, damn it!" She didn't. She let him exhaust himself, his punches growing sloppy, his breaths ragged. Then, in one seamless motion, she stepped forward, her arm snapping around his neck, a twist, a pull, 7 seconds. Jonas crumpled, unconscious, his body limp in the dirt. No one spoke. Major Kessler approached, his face unreadable. He glanced at Jonas, then at Clara, then at the stunned cadets. "Effective immediately," he said. "Clara Voss is honorary instructor. Learn from her." Clara didn't nod, didn't smile. She grabbed her duffel, tugged her torn hoodie closed, and walked off. The cadets parted, their eyes down, their laughter extinguished. The next day's live fire exercise had Clara leading a small team through a mock urban assault. Lena was in her group, rolling her eyes at the assignment. As they navigated the course, Lena ignored Clara's hand signals, rushing ahead and tripping a wire that unleashed a piercing alarm. The exercise stopped cold. Kessler stormed over, his face like thunder. "Voss, your team's a disaster!" he bellowed. Lena smirked, whispering to Milo, "Told you she's useless." Clara stood calm, her hand steady. "Lena broke formation," she said. "I signaled her to hold." Kessler turned to Lena, who shrugged. "Didn't see it," she lied. The group snickered, pinning the blame on Clara. She didn't argue, just nodded. "Understood, sir." But a drone overhead caught the moment, Lena ignoring the signal, clear as day. Kessler watched the footage, his jaw tight, and docked Lena's squad points. The laughter died, and Lena's face went white. The camp's rhythm shifted after the live fire fiasco. The air grew taut, the cadets' whispers hushed, their glances at Clara now tinged with something new. Curiosity, maybe fear. She stood at the front of the yard the next morning, her duffel slung over one shoulder, her torn hoodie swapped for a plain charcoal t-shirt. She didn't shout orders or strut like the other instructors. Instead, she demonstrated. Rifle drills, combat stances, movements so clean they seemed effortless, honed by years of unseen discipline. The cadets watched, some scribbling notes, others frozen, their eyes tracing her every move. Lena sat in the back, arms crossed, her face pale, her usual barb silenced. Jonas was gone. Rumor had it he'd been shipped to a medical bay, then reassigned to a desk job at a remote outpost. No one spoke of it, but the weight of his absence hung heavy. In a first aid drill, Clara was paired with Milo, the lanky cadet who'd mocked her in the mess hall. The task was to treat a simulated casualty under a ticking clock. Milo, eager to steal the spotlight, shoved Clara aside as she reached for the bandage kit. "I got this," he said, loud enough for the group to hear. "You'd probably just screw it up." His hands fumbled, wrapping the bandages too loose, fake blood seeping through the dummy's wounds. The instructor, a wiry medic named Torres, shook his head. "You're killing him, cadet." Milo's face flushed, and he snapped, "She was in my way," pointing at Clara. The group laughed, feeding his bravado. Clara stepped forward, her hands steady, and redid the bandages in seconds. Tight, precise, flawless. Torres nodded, impressed. "That's how you save a life," he said. Milo stormed off, muttering under his breath, but the group's laughter faded into uneasy murmurs. Later, Torres pulled Clara aside and handed her a medic patch. "Earned this," he said. She took it, her face blank, and tucked it into her duffel without a word. A week later, during a rare break, a young officer approached Clara, his boots scuffing the dirt, a clipboard clutched tightly in his hands. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low, nervous. "Someone's here for you." Clara's eyes narrowed, her posture stiffening. She followed him to the camp's gate, where a man stood waiting. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped hair and a face carved from stone, dressed in a black leather jacket and faded jeans. No uniform, but the guard stepped back as he moved, like he carried an invisible rank. The major was there too, his hands clasped behind his back. "General," he said, nodding to the man. The man didn't respond, his gaze fixed on Clara, softening for a fleeting moment. She stopped a few feet away, her expression guarded. "You didn't need to come," she said, her voice low. He tilted his head, the ghost of a smile on his lips. "Yeah," he said. "I did." The cadets watching from afar went quiet. Lena, nearby, fumbled her water bottle, the plastic clattering to the ground. The major cleared his throat, addressing the group. "This is General Elias Kane, Clara's husband." The words landed like a grenade. Kane placed a hand on Clara's shoulder, and they walked to her battered Jeep. The engine growled to life, kicking up dust as they drove off, leaving the camp in stunned silence. During the final review, the camp's top brass gathered to assess the cadets. When Clara's name came up, the room fell quiet. A junior officer, new to the base, suggested cutting her for limited leadership. The major, the one who'd saluted her, leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. "Voss's file is sealed," he said. "But know this, she could run this camp with her eyes closed." He slid a sealed envelope across the table, stamped with a black serpent emblem. "Her evaluations from Nightshade. Read them. Then tell me who's lacking." The officer opened it, his hands unsteady, his face paling with every line. Clara wasn't there. She didn't need to be. Her truth was already rewriting the narrative. The fallout came fast. Lena's sponsorship with a private security firm evaporated after a video surfaced online, showing her mocking Clara in the mess hall. It wasn't Clara who posted it, just a cadet with a phone and a sense of fairness. Lena left the camp days later, her head down, her bags packed. Jonas's reassignment wasn't the end for him either. An internal review flagged his conduct, and he was discharged quietly, his name a stain in military circles. The others, the ones who'd laughed, who'd tossed empty bottles, faced no formal punishment, but they carried something heavier. Regret. The kind that gnaws at you in the dark. Clara never returned to the camp. Her name stayed on the instructor roster, but she never led another session. Some said she was with Kane, running a shadow training program no one could trace. Others swore she'd vanished, just like Nightshade. But the cadets who'd seen her, her steady hands, her unyielding silence, didn't forget. They carried her story, passing it down, letting it spread. Not a myth, not a legend. Just the truth of a woman who didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. Years before the camp, Clara had been someone else. Not softer, but rawer, her edges still forming. She'd trained in a hidden compound, a place that didn't exist on any map, under a man whose name was never spoken aloud. He'd chosen her not for her family's wealth, but for her quiet, her ability to listen, to move with intention. For 6 years, she'd absorbed his lessons, the rifle's weight, the choke's precision, the art of standing so still the world noticed without a word. The tattoo came on the final day, the needle's bite sharp against her shoulder blade as he spoke. "This isn't a trophy," he said. "It's a vow." Clara had clenched her jaw, her eyes fixed on the wall, and carried that vow ever since. Back at the camp, the days after Clara's departure felt empty, like the air had been sucked out of the yard. The cadets pushed harder, but the fire was different. Less bravado, more focus. They'd seen something in Clara they couldn't unsee, a presence that lingered like a